New York's secret beginning. A Dutch startup. Close your eyes and listen. Hear Newark's far-off foghorns, the subway's rumble under Manhattan, and the endless rush of feet in Times Square. This is New York, the world's unofficial center, a never-sleeping giant of steel and glass. But what if we could rewind time? What if we could strip away the pavement, clear the concrete, and remove the skyscrapers, until just the island's rough, natural edges were left? Let me take you back over 360 years, to 1660. The sounds then weren't engines and sirens, but a shipbuilder's steady beat, the whisper of old oak woods, and the salty crash of the Atlantic, against a clean coast that the Lenape people knew by names. First written as Mannahatta, later beautifully known as Mannahatta. At the island's very southern tip, a new, small town was emerging, marked by steep Dutch roofs and windmills spinning slow in the ocean air. Welcome to New Amsterdam. This wasn't just a town, it was a megacity in the making, the place where ambition, diversity, and pure practicality first blended to shape the American spirit. In this video, using AI to recreate the famous 1660 Castello plan, we're diving into New Amsterdam's muddy streets at its height to see why this small outpost became the foundation for today's global cities. We start at the very southern end, where Fort Amsterdam stands watch over the Hudson River. Picture yourself on these packed earth and stone walls. This wasn't a grand European castle for show. It was a busy, all-purpose base. Part barracks, part fur storage, part command center. Here, Director General Peter Stuyvesant, the man with the wooden leg, looks out over the harbor. Stuyvesant wasn't a smooth talker. He was an executive for the Dutch West India Company. And New Amsterdam back then was basically a corporate startup. Inside the fort, you'd find organized chaos. Clerks were busy counting beaver skins, the big business of the 1600s, heading for European markets. Loud discussions in many languages filled the air. French from Huguenot refugees, German, English, and of course the direct, business-focused Dutch of the leaders. Just outside the fort's gates lay a wide-open space, a public area for markets and meetings, later officially named Bowling Green by the English in the 1700s. Today, that park is near Wall Street's Charging Bull. But in 1660, this was the town's outdoor hub for trading cattle, sharing news, and where people could simply relax. This was the town's core for politics and social life, where critical decisions for the colony were debated at tables, stained with beer and pipe smoke. Leaving the fort's serious mood, we walk along Pearl Street, the road following the East River's edge. Why Pearl? Because back then, the Manhattan coast was covered in oyster shells that gleamed like pearls in the sun. This was the neighborhood of the wealthy, the powerful traders of the New World. Look at these homes. If you expected simple log cabins from old movies, get ready for a surprise. The Dutch brought their Amsterdam style with them. These houses are tall and narrow, with striking red and yellow brick fronts, and stepped rooftops reaching up. Some of those bricks weren't made here. They might have arrived as goods or even as ballast, in the cargo holds of ships. For a rich merchant like Cornelius Steenwyck, a house was more than just a place to live. It was a display of his success. Step inside and see the amazing wealth. Fancy Persian rugs, blue and white Chinese porcelain on shelves, and heavy oak chests filled with detailed records. In New Amsterdam, your standing wasn't about titles, but your international connections. Your role in the Dutch global trade network was the only thing that mattered. But New Amsterdam wasn't just for the rich. Let's head to Stone Street, the city's first paved road, after locals asked for it and helped fund the project, because the daily mud and dust were overwhelming the town. Here we find the city's true spirit, the taverns. By the mid-1600s, people were already noticing, sometimes complaining that taverns were everywhere, taking up a huge part of town life and buildings just for drinks. Why so many? Because the tavern was the community hub, the business meeting spot, and the news source all in one. Imagine walking into a pub at dusk. The air is thick with the smell of cooking meat and smoke from long pipes. A sailor from the Caribbean tells stories of ships full of sugar. A German carpenter argues about wood prices with a farmer from Long Island. New Amsterdam was creating a totally new social experiment. Practical acceptance. When the first Jewish refugees arrived in Manhattan in 1654, fleeing danger in Brazil, Stuyvesant wanted to kick them out, but the company leaders in Holland overruled him and let them stay. Not out of kindness, but from a smart business decision. That set the precedent. New Amsterdam became a place where your personal beliefs mattered less than your economic contribution. This is the start of the multiculturalism New York proudly represents today. Now look up at the windmills on the hills. They weren't just Dutch decorations. They were machines that helped a growing town thrive, grinding grain, pumping water, and helping builders and shipmakers. The sound of saws, hammers, and wind in the sails created an early industrial rhythm. New Amsterdam was a city of creators and doers. Everyone was hustling, and fittingly, even the word hustle has Dutch roots. They didn't build huge churches or statues to gods. They built essential things: docks, seawalls, and useful water routes, most famously a canal through the center of town, allowing boats direct access to warehouses. Today's Broad Street was once that canal, the Herengracht. Picture small boats loaded with furs and grain, gliding past brick homes, creating a kind of working-class Venice. Less about romance, more about practical planning, making it even more groundbreaking. But this success story had a darker side we can't ignore. New Amsterdam was a city with many different social levels. At the very bottom were enslaved people, brought from other places or directly from Africa. Yet, under Dutch rule, many had a peculiar legal standing called half-freedom. They could own property and marry legally, but still had to work for the company. When asked, their lives still tied to a system of forced labor. Some of the first documented black landowners in New Amsterdam owned small farms north of the settlement near what's now Greenwich Village, acting as a kind of protective barrier. In a volatile frontier environment, the relationship with the Lenape people was always uneasy. The fur trade was highly profitable, but settlers taking over their ancestral lands led to violent clashes. That's why we need to head north to the town's most crucial military defense, the wall. The wall was a barrier of wooden posts and earth built out of fear, stretching from the East River to the Hudson. Plans called for sturdy posts up to 12 feet long, but it was more of a basic defense than a towering stone structure. It marked the furthest edge of European settlement on the island. On the other side lay the wild lands, farms, and the territories of the indigenous tribes. Ordinary citizens, like bakers, blacksmiths, and merchants, stood guard along the path beside this wall, muskets in hand. Yet, history's big twist is that this wall never stopped a major land attack. Instead, in 1664, the danger came from the sea. A small English fleet, including 4 warships, showed up in the harbor, their cannons pointed right at the fort and the vulnerable houses. Stuyvesant wanted to fight, But the city's merchants did what they did best. They crunched the numbers. They knew a war would ruin their businesses and their investments. So, pushed by his own people, Stuyvesant agreed to the surrender terms. The wall was eventually taken down to let the city expand, and the street beside it became the world's financial hub, Wall Street. Although New Amsterdam only existed for 40 years, its impact is lasting. When the English took over and renamed it New York to honor the Duke of York, they couldn't erase the Dutch character. They inherited a place already shaped by trade and diversity. And they quickly learned that a flexible, business-focused system kept the city thriving. New York remained unusually diverse for an English colony, even as later laws and politics complicated religious freedom in practice. This is why New York has always stood apart from strict Boston or quiet Philadelphia. New York is the offspring of a business raised on profit and variety. Looking at a map of Lower Manhattan today, you can still see the winding, narrow streets, the trace of the old Dutch property lines. The apartment living of modern Manhattan is an evolution of those cramped 17th century homes. Even some of our most American traditions, like cookies or Santa Claus, were introduced by the people of New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam figured out a challenge we still face today: how to have people from all around the world with different languages and beliefs live together in a confined space. Their solution wasn't a grand speech about freedom, but practical agreement. If we can trade and succeed together, we can live together. Rome was built by force, but New York was founded on an agreement. That's why when you stand at Battery Park now and gaze out at the harbor, you're not just seeing the past, you're witnessing the start of the modern world, where borders fade in the face of worldwide commerce. We've just completed a tour of New Amsterdam in 1660. From the bricks of Pearl Street to the cannons at the fort, every inch of this ground holds a tale of resilience and ambition. New Amsterdam might be gone from the maps, but it lives on in the heartbeat of every New Yorker, in the fast-paced energy of the stock market, and in the welcoming spirit of a city that always embraces anyone looking to strike it rich. Have you ever thought about what New York would be like now if the Dutch had never given up? Would it be a Western Venice with canals? Or would it still be the industrial powerhouse we know? Tell us your ideas in the comments below, and don't forget to suggest which historical place should we bring to life with AI next. Thanks for coming along on this journey back in time. We'll see you in our next historical recreation, where history isn't just words on a page, but an experience that feels alive. So glad you came along for this journey into the past. See you next time for another History Rewind, where yesterday's stories aren't just in books, but feel totally alive and real.